So you get the best advantage. So one of the things that you said was global leader is somebody who needs to walk that talk. And a lot of learning we get is from stories and from what we've seen in our lives, either that have happened good or not happened well. So can you share some experiences of leaders, and you don't need to take the names, but where you saw certain aspects of global leadership being demonstrated and therefore great success for the organization, or where it was required but was not demonstrated and then didn't really lead to the organization goals?
Well, without resorting to names, we do see leaders. In fact, I work for a software organization which used to be erstwhile Zansa, it's rebranded now as Teria. This company is into the IT and the IT space, and a majority of the time what we look across are budding leaders. And there's a huge gap between the erstwhile or the leaders of the past, if I may put it that way, and the leaders of the future. Now, many a time you see, just to answer Rajay's question, there are a lot of people who come back to you and say, A organization or B organization is implementing this, So we did have a situation where somebody came back to us and talked about the performance appraisal system. So sitting in HR, we were all required to mull over and see what performance management system suited us the best. So here was a situation where somebody came to us and said, I want you to work on a succession planning tool. I want you to work on how we can actually carve a new generation of leaders, right? And he was willing to do everything. So he wanted HR to come up with one of those very bombastic plans, and we did. So we went across, took a survey of 10, 12 organizations, came back and said, okay, there's nothing called one size fits all. So we need to customize something for what we're doing, and of course we deployed a lot of external consultants in the process too. So what happened at the end of it was we came up with a very good, I'm talking about this thing which happened 3 years back. And this is just around the time the acquisition was on the cards. So we came up with a wonderful system which was supposed to identify strengths, help people overcome their limitations, and of course, ensure that the goals of the organization were met. Now what happened at the end of it all was everything came up to plan, except something very vital. And that, I wouldn't blame just as one gentleman for that, but again, I would believe that he should have set the culture of coaching and mentoring in the organization. See, what happens is most of us with very rich experience table it all down beautifully on a presentation. But when it comes to practically coaching people, the next layer, the next segment, it's extremely important to have coaching and succession, coaching and mentoring go hand in hand in organizations to ensure you have a robust performance management system. Because at the end of the day, performance management is not just about pinpointing somebody's faults. It's about how you get people to operate from their position of strength, not from the position of weakness. So here was this leader. I would still like to call him a leader because he did have big plans. And he came up and he said, I don't think you really need to be focusing so much on coaching and mentoring. And like most of us in HR, I'm sure many of us in HR would agree, that we do propose, you see, but then the leader disposes. So he came up and he said, I don't think you need to really focus on coaching and mentoring. Trust me, within 3 months, all our robust plans fell through the cracks. So I wouldn't really call, or without getting personal and judgmental, I wouldn't think that that was a good example of leadership. Because you need to look at various fragments when you're devising any new system in the organization for that matter. You need to learn from examples and learnings of other organizations. And at the end of the day, you need to be willing to take that risk and say, okay, here we are. We have a potential. Today we have that. We've done that. We overcame the system by saying, let's look at a 9-point grid, which is performance versus potential. We have identified people who are high on potential, high on performance. And these are people who have been coached and who have kind of, within the organization, been officially certified as coaches and mentors for the rest of the organization.
Right. So that's a great example of the need for walking the talk and actually executing some of those required stuff like performance management system, coaching, mentoring. Sridhar, would you like to share some personal experiences of how you've seen some of this work very well or not work well? So the question is, we talked about the global mindset.
Yeah.
And some instance when you've seen some leader demonstrate that, leading to great business results, demonstrating that global mindset and demonstrating, therefore, delivering on business results, or somebody who did not show that global mindset and therefore the business results suffered?
Good question to answer. Let me sort of talk about two types of scenarios. When I used to work for this chocolate company, the chocolate company in India, I would encourage you to eat their chocolates and not those made by other cat food companies and so on and so forth. Is essentially when you, because we had a global operation, we are 6 billion GBP, which is Great British sterling.
Right.
So that's fairly big. And so when you're looking at that, and when you're looking at certain processes which are global, because what applies in the UK applies equally to Russia, to Denmark, to Poland, to India, to Pakistan, and so on. I think you need, by definition, to understand that there are certain things which are, in my view, culture agnostic. They are leadership competencies, for example. I don't think, and Peter Saville, clearly demonstrates this in his research, that these competencies of leadership have nothing to do with culture.
Right.
So it equally applies in Malaysia as much as it applies in the US. So I think when you talk about some of these mindsets in terms of some of the competencies that you talked about,
right,
the three circles that you drew, I think a lot of them are global in terms of what you bring in, whether it's a mindset, whether it is about reviewing the self and reviewing where you are as a person, or whether it's the second one that you talked about, which is about DNA. Common leadership processes and so on. So I think if you did, for example, across the world, Cadbury Schweppes or Cadbury would source cocoa beans from Ghana. Now, if you did not understand that economics of Ghana and Mozambique and those parts of Africa, West Africa largely, you could not make good chocolates. So therefore, you needed to understand globally what is the dynamics of how the supply chain works,
right,
what exactly happens to the prices, how do you get your competitive advantage, at what points in time do you buy, what time do you manufacture, and so on. So I think a lot of this is global.
right.
And therefore, I believe that if consumers are global, what you deliver is also has to be global. I can take another example where I think, by and large, till recently, in our sugar business in the Murugapallu, which is a very, very old business, second longest listed company in the country today, EID Paddy.
Yeah.
We have always thought that we are a sugar company which is perhaps in Tamil Nadu or which is perhaps in South India, if we went about. And that brings in certain competencies in question, pressures in question, in terms of your efficiency, in terms of your financial parameters of what you deliver on. Right. If you change that lens a little bit and say that you're also competing with sugar companies in Brazil, you're competing with companies in Vietnam, in Cambodia, and in Ethiopia, then you are changing the mindset to say what therefore are the metrics of measurement of performance. So that's where we were not there, and I think we are sort of getting there. It is a journey, and I think it will take time. We have not matured as an organization yet, but I think the search is on and the journey is on, and hopefully in the next 4 to 5 years we should be truly a global player in terms of that business. So 2 examples, one from a very developed sort of an economy in terms of what is happening, and the other from an emerging market scenario, and how we looked at sugar as a very common commodity product and how we can take it to the world.
Great. I have coming from there, and one of the things that you said was culture agnostic. So some of these leadership things, and for example, leadership DNA is culture agnostic, is specific to the organization as such. I want to ask you, Sharda, in your experience, what do you feel about that? So do leadership development processes and principles remain the same across the globe? Or there are nuances of different countries, in your opinion, and Professor, maybe your thoughts on that, so that you in your mind think of that. But is that a constant, or does that need to get modified?
Actually, I think it's a constant. And which is why I said that one has to look at the world as one country, which means that irrespective of where I'm placed, I need to be successful.
Right.
I'll just give an example to illustrate this, and it's a very live, ongoing example. Many of you here may know that one of our largest acquisitions and investments has been in Egypt. And we invested in Egypt about 4 years ago. The team that was put together to go and take over and put in a project, we acquired this company for $300 million, and the project that we have put in is for $1 billion. So obviously, the new company is far, far bigger than the one that we acquired. So the team that we put together were seasoned professionals. I would think probably the youngest age, I'm talking about the leadership team, I think the youngest person would be probably 45. And these were people, except for 2 of them, which is the MD and the Vice Chairman. The Vice Chairman was in charge of the projects and the MD in terms of operations and functions. Nobody had worked abroad. Most of the project team, the technical team, had worked in factories and probably not even lived in a city for many, many years in India. Now, if, let's say, we were not, it wasn't the common thing that I'm talking about, these people should have found it very, very difficult to run it. Yes, there were problems in the first 1 year from a work culture perspective, because working in Egypt, if some of you have, will know that it is very, very different from working in India. And this was the pre-revolution days, so it was not because of the revolution. I remember that the first couple of trips when I was there were complaints saying that we just can't work here because we need more people. What we can do in India in 1 hour will take 1 day. And that's the way they work there. I mean, nothing wrong or right about it. In 2 years, we have learned to understand them, work with them, get work out of them, be successful. And the scenario when you had the revolution and the post-revolution, which we're still going through, we have handled it, I would say, exceedingly well. The leaders have done very, very well. And there have been several occasions when we have been challenged to the core, both mentally, physically, managerially, you name it. And this team has stayed together and managed it. And that is possible only if there are certain intrinsic leadership competencies, skills, traits, whatever you call, that is in them to be able to manage. Because it's not that anything was taught, there was no coaching and mentoring, nothing was there. It's just that probably in the 3 things that you said, they learned to renew themselves with a global mindset.
Great. So Professor, my question, next question is, if the leadership DNA for global leaders is similar across the globe, depending on the organization of course, should the processes also, what works in, for example, West, would it also work in India? As an example, if 360 is being used in a very high manner, extensive manner, for assessments in the West, do you think that's also a tool for India?
As I was listening to the responses of Sabita, Shrival, as well as Shah, what occurred to me is that this whole global mindset thing, perhaps we need to look at it in 2 perspectives. The first perspective is in terms of your own vision, in terms of how you able to think globally. You give the example of Dhirubhai Ambani, when he talked about 32 billion, it was global thought. terms of the very way that you conceive business. Or if you look at what Mr. Ratan Tata did for not only Jaguar but Urus, if you see the whole series of things which are done, it is audacious. Nobody could have ever thought of, that kind of audacious moves. Particularly between 2004 and 2007, the kind of acquisition that Tata Group made, it is mind-blowing.
Right.
So on one hand, when we talk about global mindset, I'm sure we are also talking about this ability to think global and have the courage to think global and go about such targets. This is what I call as the hardware aspect of a business.
Right.
The software aspect has to do, of course, with the organization and people. In terms of are you able to be global, in terms of creating an organization which is global, or creating a leader who is global.
Right.
There I tend to agree with Shaka that the basic DNA or the kind of processes and everything will be more or less similar across the globe. Though there will be certain contextualization in terms of culture and things like that, the way that you identify, groom and develop a leader, I would suspect would be almost similar, irrespective of different cultures and things of this kind.
Right.
And that's why I would guess that we will find a lot of similarities among leaders globally.
Right.
Now when it comes to the organizational side, I talked about some examples in terms of Ratan Tata and Dhirubhai Ambani. In organizational side, it's pretty much restricted to my own personal exposure. One of the persons I used to always feel very impressed is the erstwhile dean of Kellogg, whom I had an opportunity to interact when he visited here as well as when I went to US. Don Jacobs, who was the so-called legendary dean, who was a dean for 26 years before Deepak Jain. One of the phenomenal things about him is that at a time when even in the US diversity was not considered a big deal thing, he realized that wherever merit is, and I'm going to go and see. To the extent that today if you find even the faculty members of Kellogg, not only there are a significant proportion of Indians, but there are a lot of non-whites who are part of the team. And what I understand from our own founder, Professor Bala, is that all credit goes to Don Jacobs for his vision. And when he visited us, I had an opportunity to actually discuss with him. And it is amazing that to the extent that even Deepak Jain could become, and Deepak Jain, as we all know, was the first brown-skinned Indian to become dean of a top business school in US, primarily responsible because of the kind of culture and ethos that Don Jacobs created.
Right.
And today Kellogg is very happy that he did that.
Right.
In a smaller way, another example I can think of is a person who has, till recently, I think he continues to be running Hershey's in India. And I had an opportunity to meet and interact with him. And, one thing I realized about this person is that he's an American, new to India, but the way he got involved with not only the cultural and other aspects, the people issues. When our students did project for Hershey's, he will insist on going down with the students to the retailer, to the dealer, to the distributor, to the customer, and he will roll up his sleeve. He will have the masala dosa somewhere in Arakonam without absolutely any hesitation and things like that. And I could see him creating an organization which is really global in terms of his mindset. So these are some of the examples I can share where people, by their own walking the talk that we discussed, are creating a DNA which will hopefully carry on for a long time. So I guess these are some of the things that which make global.
Terrific.
Can I respond?
Yeah, of course.
I'm going to spoil your linearity.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Having worked outside of India for a few years, I think there are some basic differences. If you buy a mobile phone in India and an Indian buys it, he would start using it straight away. The instruction manual will never be referred to. If you were in the UK or somewhere else in the Western world, the chances are that the instruction manual would be read first, and then the mobile phone would be used. So therefore, there is a little bit of a mindset change here and an orientation difference. For example, the way the traffic would work in the West is very different from the way it works in the East or in India. No Westerner can understand
as to how in this type of a traffic that works, where there are several modes of transport, and perhaps the slowest vehicle goes on the far right of the road. The question would be, and how come there are no accidents today? And in average speeds of 70 miles and 80 miles, where you follow rules, perhaps there are more fatal accidents in Greece and in Spain and in the UK. So I think the disciplining of the mind and the way we approach things is a bit different, in my view.
Right.
While I did make the point that it is competencies are cultural agnostic.
Right.
I think the point that Sharda made about, in a different context, what takes 1 hour in India would take, I would discount her 1 day to half a day in Egypt. We used to have a large presence in Cairo for chocolates and so on. It does take 1 day, she says. So we will go by what she says. We won't have a fight here on this. Now, similarly, if you look at an American, he would be completely focused on work between 9 and 5. He won't have chats on the side. He's not going to say, now tell me how was the movie Murphy and when did you see it? He's not going to do these things.
Right.
So that will be left after 5 o'clock when he's going to sit down with a glass of lager or a beer and say, now you tell me all about Murphy and why is Murphy fighting Murphy? So I think there are fundamental differences in this sense between the orientations. The way we have been trained, the way our mind works, the way our art reaches out. So to that extent, I think for HR to sort of say, GE used 360, so I will use 360, I think is a bit funny. And it doesn't make sense to me. I think a lot of things of the 360 can be done through a conversation, through using certain Indian idioms of touch, connect, which we are very prone to, as compared to an Anglo-Saxon who doesn't want the same touch and connect.